What really happened on Monday is Auburn hired Hugh Freeze. Now, I want to actually congratulate Auburn Athletic Director John Cohen for not falling into a trap, or possibly the PR professionals who crafted this quote for John Cohen, for them not falling into the trap. They announced that Hugh Freeze was hired. There was nothing about being a builder of souls and a leader of men. None of that. This is what John Cohen said, or it was attributed to him. After a thoughtful, thorough, and well-vetted search, we ended where we started with Hugh Freeze. Of all the candidates we considered, Hugh was the best fit. Fit has several meanings, but the most important factors were student-athlete development, football strategy, recruiting, and SEC experience.
It's perfect.
That's what you needed to say. Don't fall into the trap at the press conference on Tuesday morning and be like, oh no, Hugh is a leader of men and he's changed since he was fired at Ole Miss for using his university cell phone to call hookers. Don't say any of that. Just say, we hired him to get dudes and win games, because that's what he does.
All that statement said was football.
That's right. That is exactly what he should say, because you're going to get those questions if you're John Cohen, and there's not much you can say to them. You're going to get those questions if you're Hugh Freeze, and there's not much you can say to him. Now, I will say, Hugh Freeze has been pretty upfront about all this stuff. He will say, I did it, I messed up, and I'm sorry. Which, by the way, there's not much more you can say in that situation.
And also, the downfall of so many coaches has been lying. Like, the action, a lot of times, has been less. Not that this one isn't severe, but the thing that
might have been part of the reason Hugh Freeze got fired for cause at Ole Miss, because the initial conversation with Ross Bjork, who was the AD at the time, might not have been entirely truthful.
So when you have a cell phone and it's a public cell phone, do they just vet it normally?
Well, when a lawyer representing Houston Nutt hits your records, listen. Anytime there's something involving Houston Nutt and cell phone records, like if you are involved in something that also involves Houston Nutt and someone requests your cell phone records, just move to the Bahamas. Like, leave the country, because something bad's going to happen to you.
Ari had 377 phone calls with Domino's, all of which ranged less than 2 minutes in time.
Exactly. Like, at first, Houston Nutt victimized himself with all those text messages to the lady. But the second time, he got Hugh Freeze with those other phone calls. So that's the thing you've got to be careful with.
Is there a Houston Nutt last name joke here, or should we just move on?
Do you really want to get canceled tonight? Is that your goal?
Okay. I can't control myself.
Hey, I actually covered a game with him when he was at Murray State.
Oh, the Racers.
1996 playoffs. But all that stuff's open record. So it's easy to get. I did that once with Steve Alford when he was the Iowa coach and flirting with New Mexico.
Yeah, so here's the deal. John Cohen, Chris Roberts, president at Auburn, Hugh Freeze yourself. When you get up there on Tuesday morning, stick to football. And I realize we're the ones who yell at people when they tell us to stick to sports. But your best bet is to stick to football, because there is a significant portion of the Auburn fan base that's mad about this hire, that is embarrassed about this hire. My guess is they will not be as upset. Some of them may never forgive you. Most of them will if you win. And I got to say, Hugh Freeze can win at Auburn. He is pretty well positioned to win at Auburn. If you look at what he did at Ole Miss, and then you look at the changes in the sport, it actually favors him being better at Auburn than he was at Ole Miss.
So let me ask you guys, what is the percentage, or maybe not percentage, the scale from 1 to 10 of desperation here? Is this a desperation hire, or is this a measured, this guy is going to be the best at winning?
Oh, this is a calculated risk. This is a completely calculated risk.
But if it wasn't as terrible as it's been, do you make this calculated risk, and where does that end up on the desperation scale?
I don't know how desperate here's the thing about it.
It didn't feel desperate, but the results reeks of desperation.
So he's a guy who got dudes at Ole Miss beat Nick Saban 2 years in a row, twice in about 6 years. You know who got dudes and beat Nick Saban like twice in 6 years?
Gus Malzahn.
Gus Malzahn. But you had to do something different last time. And it didn't matter who was doing the hiring because the faction that wanted to fire Gus and install Kevin Steele wanted it to be the defensive guy being hired. And then Alan Green, who was the athletic director at the time, wanted to hire Brian Harsin because that's who he decided he wanted to hire. But all of that was basically a repudiation of Gus Malzahn. This is an admission that, no, that was probably the right guy. So they hired Gus Malzahn with baggage, essentially. And Hugh's a buddy of Gus's. Like, they're pals.
Yeah.
This is essentially almost them going, hand up, we screwed up. Should have never fired Gus in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was a bad move, and Brian Harsin was where does it rank as far as SEC hires? I mean, to go group of 5, do we ever see another firing or hiring like this? I mean, Urban Meyer was great when he went from Utah to Florida, but he was at a
Billy
different
Napier
level.
Came from the group of 5.
Yeah,
Well,
but he was from the
He
South.
just lost to Florida State, too.
Yeah.
So
Hey, you watch your mouth, okay? It's a build.
they're not happy. The natives are not happy after the Vanderbilt and Florida State losses. I'm with you. That you got to figure out, can he recruit? You hired him to build a roster. So he either will or he won't, and you can't decide that right now. But the Hugh Freeze hire, I am convinced it can work really well for Auburn because forget what he got fired for. We've discussed that. Much of the controversy around Hugh Freeze while he was at Ole Miss were accusations that Ole Miss was buying players. Guess what's now basically legal?
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So, and Auburn will have a large NIL kitty, and Auburn.
It's much easier to win at Auburn, especially now, than it was ever at Ole Miss.
Correct.
Unless you
Auburn,
think that Ole Miss was cheating at a level that made them have a star competitive advantage.
I don't think Ole Miss was doing anything different than
anyone
many
else.
of the other old line SEC schools. Like I don't really think, but people got mad because Ole Miss isn't supposed to get those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are certain schools, and Auburn's one of those schools that's supposed to get those guys. So, I mean, we could be talking about dudes everywhere at Auburn. I mean, Auburn minus Brian Harsin's classes always has some dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The question is if they're moving into dudes everywhere territory.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Derek Browns, that's somebody that they should get.
Yeah.
And just like when he was at Ole Miss getting Laquan Treadwell, that was a strange pickup, but it was Robert
Laramie
Incognito.
Tunsil. I mean, Laramie Tunsil from Lake City, Florida.
Can we also talk about how the Laramie Tunsil thing on draft night was one of the
Yes.
craziest things that's ever happened in the history of sports?
It is. I was at Sports Illustrated at the time. We were doing a live draft show, and that video pops up, and I'm like, oh my God. And
I was in my living room and my mouth dropped. I've never seen anything like that before.
it was wild. It was wild. And craziest part of it is at the draft, Jimmy Sexton is there with Hugh Freeze, his client, and Laramie Tunsil, his client. And it's just like, that's a pretty strange situation to get thrown into.
Laramie Tunsil almost got a touchdown pass on Sunday too, by the way.
Yeah, that cost him a lot of money, but was a bargain for the Dolphins, and then they got to fleece the Texans and got some draft picks.
Bill O'Brien, man, what a horse trader he was.
Hey,
lame pony.
we're not
for a
talking about
thoroughbred.
him right now because Bill O'Brien may be headed back to the NFL. That's one possibility. So we've not seen Bill O'Brien get a head coaching job, and it certainly seemed like it's always interesting when the Alabama fans are like, get rid of this coordinator, and he miraculously gets a head coaching job somewhere. But that was going to happen. If it doesn't happen, my thinking is when this season ends, Bill O'Brien's going to the NFL somewhere.
If Bill O'Brien ends up in the NFL somewhere, that's like the bet. Like Alabama's like the rehab for coaches, right? But even if you relapse, you're still going to get another job somewhere. Like
well, and
it works out well for you no matter
when
how
Nick
it goes.
Saban decides to rehome you, he seems to find good homes for you.
Yeah,
Like
Right.
So
Bill O'Brien becomes the new Iowa offensive coordinator. Book it.
They would love it here. That would work because he and Ferentz, all the Ferentzes are tight. So, you know who else would love it? Me. I have something to write about that's more than 10 points.
Now, here's the thing. Bill O'Brien actually is a pretty good offensive coordinator. You know, the Alabama fans are mad because things didn't go the way they want. That's more about developing receivers, I think, or recruiting receivers out of the portal, or however we want to talk about it. It's not normal to have as many first-round receivers as they had in a row, and there was bound to be a dip at some point. It came this year, and that stinks for you guys because it's not what you're used to. But I think that's probably the bigger issue at this point.
You know, the one thing I wanted to go back to Freeze that I was thinking about today is when Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma to USC, we had the discussion of heel, right? Or like the villain of the sport.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of subsided a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think, do regular fans hate him or just Oklahoma fans?
I think some regular fans hate him. I think
he doesn't feel hated to me.
There's
a
subset of fans who feel like if you use the portal to build your roster, it's still cheating. And so I think that group will get smaller and smaller every year. But
once it becomes a more accepted reality.
Right, exactly. So I think there's that. Hugh Freeze personality, like, and Hugh and I have talked about this, like, he could be the heel, but his personality is not to embrace that. He wants everybody to like him.
Yeah.
He really does.
Yeah.
And so it might be easier for him if he just grow a goatee and say, I'm the bad guy. And you know what? His fans would embrace him if he won and did that. Or his team's fans. But
well, everybody wants to be the good bad guy or the successful bad guy.
Yeah. Not everybody. No. Like I'm telling you, Hugh Freeze wants you to like him. He wants everyone to love him. And that's a normal personality trait. There are a lot of people like that. And so that'll be interesting to see how he deals with, because it will be ferocious. Like the backlash to this is going to be ferocious.
Like people standing outside the stadium on game day with posters, ferocious.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. And he's going to have to deal with that. And he's going to have to learn to let it go. Ari, it's like you and I have this discussion about when people say mean things to us on Twitter or in the comments under our stories, and neither of us is particularly great at letting it go. Like he has to pretend none of that stuff exists. Otherwise, because if even one millionth of it gets to him, it's gonna bug him.
So, do you think that we want people to like us, people?
I think partially we are. I think I don't think I could truly embrace being a heel.
Yeah,
I don't think I would like that very much. Yeah. So and he, like, Hugh Freeze, well-documented history of like going into people's DMs after Twitter searching or seeing people, say things about him or say things about people he likes. He'll hit you in the DMs like that. That's probably got to stop if you're going to be a head coach at Auburn. It's a different level of scrutiny being the head coach at Auburn, and it's more scrutiny than Ole Miss too. Like Auburn, LSU, Tennessee, Alabama, those jobs in the SEC. I think Florida probably qualifies. Like, you got to be pretty careful what you do, because everything becomes a thing.
Yeah.
Everything becomes a 4-hour discussion on Feinbaum for 3 days a week. And I mean,
precisely. I mean, look at Jimbo Fisher's season.
Yeah.
And that's just from losing games.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, this will be interesting. But I advise John Cohen and I advise Hugh Freeze and I advise Chris Roberts, do not fall into the trap of
trying to pretend like it's something it's not.
Making this a morality play. It's not a morality play. It's football, and you're paying millions of dollars to someone to win football games. That is why you were paying him. If you really cared about the person you hire as your head coach being a molder of young men and what blah, 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 you would have kept the interim you just had. You don't care about that. You care about winning games. And you know what? If you're going to admit that, that's fine. At least you're being honest.
What's wrong with admitting it? Like
nothing.
It's the literal conference slogan.
It is.
So
exactly right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
So yeah, So it's just, you got, like, I don't know. We don't have to talk about the baggage, but it's just like, it is there, and it's going to be a discussion point, and the only thing
Well,
that's going
people
to make
made
it
up
stop
all these rumors about Brian Harsin when they were trying to fire him for free.
that were less.
They were less tawdry than what actually happened with Ole Miss, with Hugh and Freeze and Ole Miss.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah.
it is.
This is all about just let, in his case, walk. It's exactly what you said. Let him walk in the door, maybe play Disco Inferno, walks to the podium, and then it's a football decision. This is all it's all about.
And when Hugh gets up there, be like, we're going to fling it around.
Yeah.
We're going to get 5-star recruits. We're going to beat Alabama. Thank you and God bless. I'm out.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you after. I'll talk to you on signing day.
Well, what do you think Nick Saban's reaction was to this in a private room when he saw it? Because, like, let's give Saban some ass juice. Yeah.
Damn it. That's what he was saying. He does not like dealing with that offense. Does not like it.
Yeah.
Does not relish the idea of dealing with
Well,
that
he's
offense
also
with
going to be
better
dealing
players.
with his face every single day in the state of Alabama, too.
Absolutely. And Hugh Freeze is an aggressive recruiter.
I
Like,
know.
we talked about Lane Kiffin being willing to go up against Nick and Kirby head-to-head for players. Hugh is actually more willing. Like, Hugh is a more aggressive recruiter.
And tell me that's not the most effective litmus test of whether you made the right hire or not from a football standpoint. What is Nick Saban's reaction?
I think you're right.
If you have Nick Saban saying, damn it, then you did the right thing from a football standpoint.
From a football standpoint, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, you're paying millions of dollars for this person to win football games. I realize there are people out there who think it's not about that, but every hiring and firing ultimately is about that.